Okay, we are picking up in We Agnostics on the bottom of page 47, the very bottom. Last sentence on the page, which is technically, I guess, paragraph 4 that's going to go right into 48. So here we go. And no catch up, David. Right, we're just diving in.
Well, the only thing I would like to say, if you don't mind, I rethought
Please.
that. So
Okay.
if we go up two paragraphs, let's go up two paragraphs on page 47. Second paragraph that starts out was we needed to ask ourselves. So it says we needed, which is a must. We figured out throughout the whole book, there's about 139 musts in the big book. Have to, had to. Words like needed, those are musts. To ask ourselves, but one short question. And here it is. Here's the question. Do I now believe, circled now at this moment, or am I willing to believe, either one, that there is a power greater than myself? Then here's the result of that. As soon as a man can say that he does believe or is willing to believe, we emphatically assure him that he's on his way. If you have done that, if I have done that, that I believe, or am I even willing to believe, congratulations, you've taken step two.
Hmm.
So based on that, as we go down through the paragraph, it says, we emphatically assure him that he's on his way. It has been repeated, proven among us that upon this simple cornerstone, so the cornerstone is our second step, a wonderfully effective spiritual structure can be built, meaning a relationship with power through the work of the steps. Then there's a little asterisk there. So we didn't do it this time, whatever reason, spiritual experience that they're talking about, the appendix 2 in the back of the book. There's three times in our big book, page 25, 27, and page 47, here where we are right here, that Bill puts an asterisk and says, go read the spiritual experience in the book.
Hmm.
So if you want to know where that's at, if you're not familiar with it, in the third edition, it's on page 5, 6, 7. And in the fourth edition, it's on page 5, 6, 9. So and then the next paragraph is setting us up for the paragraph that David has started reading, or is going to start reading for us here, because it's talking about spiritual principles and how if we can accept it based on faith, which is actually, we're talking about belief here, it talks about here in the middle of that paragraph on page 47.3 about spiritual approaches. That does not mean religion. That just means spiritual is a spiritual discipline or disciplines. Religion is a bunch of rules usually. Nothing wrong with either one. Thank God for spiritual principles because they are disciplines. Then as I read farther into that paragraph, I said, I wish I had what that man has. So if I ask a guy to be my sponsor, I want what he has because he has, I may have belief because I have accepted the fact that I need this power in my life. He has faith. And how did he get from faith? Because hope is equal to faith. So I'm a hopeless variety of an alcoholic. I need to have some hope. How do I get some hope? By having some belief. And hope is described to me as a vision beyond my present circumstances. I need to have some hope. So believe that there could be a God. It's not me for sure. That a power greater than myself can restore me to sanity, clear thinking as it relates to alcohol or drugs. And then it says, but I cannot accept as surely true many articles of faith, which are so plain to him. So this is a process. I do not have to accept everything at once. I do not have to take a big giant bite. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. But let's bite him quickly. Let's rapidly get through this work here so we can get to God. Why? Because people are going to die if we don't do that. And then the last thing it says, so it was comforting to learn that we could commence at a simpler level. Simpler level. So this is a starting point. Belief is a starting point. And as I start the process of believing something, and we gave these analogies last week, David gave one. I moved to a new town. My car's on the fritz. I need a mechanic. I go to Kevin and say, Kevin, what mechanic do you use? He goes, well, I use Janice over there, and I trust her. She does good work. So he goes, okay, so I believe Kevin because he said so. I go meet Janice. She does the work that she says she's going to perform at a reasonable price. Now what do I have? I went from belief. Now I have faith. And the same thing is true when I start exercising my belief. Just like when I go to the gym. When I go to the gym to work out, what am I doing? I'm exercising to get stronger. I'm doing the same exact thing here. I'm exercising my faith.
Okay. Bottom of 47. Here we go. New content. Besides a seeming inability to accept much on faith, we often found ourselves handicapped by obstinacy, sensitiveness, and unreasoning prejudice. Many of us have been so touchy that even casual reference to spiritual things made us bristle with antagonism. This sort of thinking had to be abandoned. Though some of us resisted, we found no great difficulty in casting aside such feelings. Faced with alcoholic destruction, we soon became as open-minded on spiritual matters as we had tried to be on other questions. In this respect, alcohol was a great persuader. It finally beat us into a state of reasonableness. Sometimes this was a tedious process. We hope no one else will be prejudiced for as long as some of us were.
So a lot of stuff here that Bill's talking about. First of all, let's remember that what Bill is talking about, he is re-referencing page 47 on page 47, 48 over and over again. What do we have to do? Lay aside our old ideas and our old prejudices. That's what Bill's asking us to do here in these 2 pages. So bottom of page 47, the 4th paragraph, besides seeming inability to accept much on faith, not there yet, but I believe, and it tells me in that 2nd paragraph, emphatically assure him I'm on my way to faith, if I can do that. Top of page 48, we are often found ourselves handicapped by obstinacy. So obstinacy is like stubbornness or unreasonableness, resistance to something, right? I mean, that's my definitions anyways. Sensitiveness, so easily offended. Everything, my little feelings get hurt all the time, right? My wife looked at me the wrong way, boo-hoo, stuff like that. And unreasonable prejudice. So unreasonable prejudice is like my concept of life. However, I think life should be, I got to let go of all these ideas. What must I do there? I must let go, abandon these old ideas. I must abandon them. What are they the opposite of for me? They're the opposite of honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness, if you take a look at them. I think they're the opposite of those things. This is a great big warning. Many of us have been so touchy, and even casual reference to spiritual things made us bristle with antagonism. So antagonism is like when I'm agitated or hostile about something. This sort of thinking had to be abandoned. There is another must Bill talks about. Though some of us resisted, we found no great difficulty in casting aside such feelings. Here's a great big warning. Faced with alcoholic destruction, we soon became as open-minded in spiritual matters as we had tried to be on other questions. And then it says, in this respect, alcohol was a great persuader. I'm going to put the word is on top of the word was. It is, still will be, whiskey. And then it says it finally beat us into a state of reasonableness. You know what did that? Whiskey did that. Cocaine did that. Drugs did that for me. Beat me into a state of reasonableness. But when I am done good and for all, sometimes it's a tedious process. We hope no one else will be prejudiced for as long as some of us were. Another warning there. Meaning that it's in that sentence, it finally beat into a state of reasonableness. That means when I'm done, I am done. I see the truth. I cannot successfully control the amount and manage the amount that I use. And once I stop, I cannot stay stopped. And my life and everything on page 52 and those bedevilments I'm living in those things as though I'm controlled by devils.
So let's double back a little bit on some of these words. David gave us some definitions, but let's dig deeper on them. So the paragraph starts out with, besides a seeming inability to accept much on faith. So we're being characterized as we're coming in that a seeming inability means sort of an alleged or an apparent, incapability to accept much on faith. We found ourselves often handicapped by obstinacy, right? To be obstinate is to be stubbornly refusing to change one's opinion or chosen course of action, despite attempts to persuade one to do so. So remember, let's context check in here. What is the point of this chapter, We Agnostics? If you go back and think about how did we get to this point, started way back with the doctor's opinion, where we learned the nature of our illness. And mostly the doctor was helping us understand the physical powerlessness, right? How we break out in craving, our allergic reaction to alcohol, and we start drinking. He talks about the mental powerlessness, right? Our obsession, we're always picking up. And he introduces a little bit. He doesn't really talk about the spiritual malady, but he talks about the only solution we have is the spiritual one, right? A complete psychic change. So, and then we get into Bill's story, and there's a solution, and more about alcoholism. And critically, in There Is a Solution, right? Back on page 27, favorite page, we go back to it almost every week. Think about where we are in the pages here. So sort of smack in the middle of where we are and where we started, page 27 introduces to us what the spiritual awakening is going to look like. And again, recapping that without rereading it is all the stuff in my head, all the stuff in my heart, and all the stuff in my gut. When I get spiritually awakened, have a vital spiritual experience, it's going to get cast aside and replaced by new ones. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because then as we get into, more about alcoholism and We Agnostics, what Bill is really doing here is he's appealing to us to consider how we can change and how we can help God allow, how we can start to let God in. And what he's doing here is he's appealing to us, but he's also selling to us a little bit. Remember, Bill was a sales guy, right? The stock speculator, and you're getting groups of buyers together. So let's not forget who Bill was. And I'm not saying this to be pejorative at all. I'm a sales guy. Dave's a sales guy, right? That's why we're good talkers. So Bill's selling us on some concepts here. And what he's saying is, listen, if you're like me, you came in, and no matter how I'm trying to sell to you and convince you, our brains are entirely shut off, stubbornly refusing to change, despite attempts, right, to persuade somebody to do so. How many times did people try to help us? David, if you'd only this. David, if you'd only think about that. David, if you'd only moderate, right? Couldn't do it. Why would it be any easier for me to, come up with faith, come up with belief? Why would that be any easier than it would be for me to put down the drink or the drug? It wasn't. All of these behaviors were very ingrained by old thinking, feeling, and reacting. And then the second word. So we're also handicapped by sensitiveness. Does it mean to be sensitive? I think we all know what this means, and we use it in a lot of communication. This is a nice definition, right? Quick to detect or respond to slight changes, signals, or influences. Okay, so I'm quick to respond to a slight change. So I don't like that. I'm very sensitive to this change. Oh, don't make me question that. Don't suggest I do something else. But also the second, sort of definition there, and there are many, right? But sensitiveness of a person or a person's behavior, right? Having or displaying a quick and delicate appreciation of others' feelings. That's the sensitiveness we need to get to, right? As our head, heart, and our gut change. The first one is how I behave today, which is that if you say anything, I'm going to have a problem with it. I'm going to negatively react to it. My spiritual awakening is going to allow me to then become a sensitive person. And all of a sudden, I'll become interested in you and your problems, right? Which are the promises that we get later in the book. I become, from being so concerned about what you're saying to me, that I become concerned about you, and what's happening in your life. Many of us have been so touchy, so sensitive, right? A casual reference to spiritual things made us bristle, right? That's a very visceral word, to bristle. It's like have a physical response with antagonism, right? And, the protagonist is like the hero in the story, and the antagonist, so therefore antagonism, is like the bad guy, right? So you bring this up to me, say, hey, David, why don't you start to think about God or spirituality or religion? And my reaction is the bad guy, the evil guy, the no guy. This sort of thinking had to be abandoned. Abandon means I leave it completely behind, right? We're also told in the book to abandon ourselves completely, right? To this program of recovery. It's such a powerful world. Some was resisted. We found no great difficulty in casting aside such feelings. David mentioned that's a promise because faced with alcoholic destruction, we soon became as open-minded on spiritual matters as we tried to be on other questions. And this is going back to what we talk about so many times. Does 12-step recovery work for all people with an alcohol or drug or other addictive problems? No, it doesn't work all the time. Why? Because if someone is afflicted and they're not hopeless, they don't agree that they're powerless, this solution is not going to work. It works for me when I'm faced with destruction. If my disease, my illness hasn't advanced to the point that destruction is imminent, I'm not going to buy into this. I'm not going to pick up what David's selling. There's no way. Because I'll still be holding on to the belief that I've got the power, the choice, or the control. Huh? All right, let's move on. The reader may still ask why he should believe in a power greater than himself. We think there are good reasons. Let's have a look at some of them. So now we're going to itemize some things, right? We're not just going to sort of talk in a general philosophical, conceptual way. Here's going to be some real reasons. Go ahead, David.
I'm good. Nothing really to add to that. Next paragraph is
okay. Yeah.
Meaty.
Anything else to set it up? Okay. So let's look at some of these reasons, guys. First of all, the practical individual of today is a stickler for facts and results. Nevertheless, the 20th century readily accepts theories of all kinds, provided they're firmly grounded in fact. Let me read that again. Think about what he's saying here. The 20th century readily accepts theories of all kinds, provided they're firmly grounded in fact. So there's a little fallacy in this, right? We have numerous theories, for example, about electricity. Everybody believes them without a murmur of doubt. Why this ready acceptance? Simply because it's impossible to explain what we see, feel, direct, and use without a reasonable assumption as a starting point. Oh, we got Rob here now. Now the meeting can start. Welcome, Rob. Go ahead, David.
Hey, Rob.
Good to have you, buddy.
So for me to have the practical individual of today is a stickler for facts and results. So then it goes on to explain more about what they're exactly Bill's talking about there. It says in the middle of that paragraph, we have numerous theories about, for example, about electricity. I don't know if anyone else can explain how electricity works. I cannot. All I know is when I walk over to that wall over there, I flip the light switch on, it comes on. We have gone without power in a storm, and I'll still walk to the house and flip on the switch, even though I know the power's out. You know, it's like, and then here's another one. I have an iPhone, and if I want to, I'm going to text RJ after the meeting, and I go to text RJ. I can't explain to you how my phone works. How can I text RJ right now in this moment, and 2 seconds later, he gets the text? I can't explain how that works. Does it matter how I need to know? My level of needing to know will keep me insane when it comes to drinking, alcoholism, and drug addiction. It will keep me insane. I don't need to know. I just need to know that it works. Why? Because it works for Eric. Why? Because it works for Patrick. That's why. It works for millions of other people. I don't need to know. How does this work? I don't know how it works. I can just tell you that it does work. If I work all these steps honestly and thoroughly, I will have a spiritual experience. That's what I do know, because that is my experience. And then I get to be a demonstration of other people's life through that whole thing. So me having these theories, that doesn't matter anymore. After it says everybody believes them without a murmur of doubt. Why this ready acceptance? Simply because it's impossible to explain what we see, feel, direct, and use without a reasonable assumption as a starting point. So all I need is a jumping off point. We're going to talk about turning points in the third step. We're talking about jumping off points in the first step. We're talking about coming from belief to faith here. That I believe that, see, I have a relationship of power all the time now. I have access to that power. And where was that power all my life? Well, we find out about it on page 55 in the second paragraph. It was deep down inside of every man, woman, and child. It was just covered up by pomp and circumstance. And I needed to be free of that stuff, about these circumstances. Alcoholism and drug addiction is an internal illness. It has nothing to do with the external world. I don't need to know why I'm an alcoholic or drug addict. I will tell you that my dad was, my uncle was, my grandfather was. Biologically, I just got it. It doesn't make any freaking difference. I have one sister's an alcoholic. I had a daughter who was an alcoholic and a drug addict who passed away from this disease. I had a brother pass away from this disease. This happens. It kills people every freaking day. But I don't need to know where I got to come. I just need to know that it's biological. And if I don't address it internally, I will not be able to get sober. That's just my experience with being a real variety of an alcoholic and a drug addict, like of the hopeless variety. And what I found out that this inside job is designed by the steps to me be free of that. David brought up page 27 of the book, what a spiritual experience looks like. I've had them. I continue to have them. I don't live in the bedevilments today. And then the charge of having that spiritual experience is to carry this message to the alcoholic who still suffers. That's my charge. And then the real complicated part is to practice principles in all my affairs. When I practice that, when I do that on a regular basis, it becomes second nature today. I have access to power all the time. Dude, I pinch myself all day long of all the freedom that I have. You know, it's just, how much freedom do you want? How free do you want to be? Is a Mark Houston reference, right, Eric? How free do you want to be? Work these steps as if you're a drowning man. Don't tell me you need a different color life preserver or a different rope. I'll take whatever you got. Please take me through these steps rapidly so I can have an experience just like you did. And then I can be free of the bondage of self. That's what I suffer from. And today, dude, I got so much freedom. I can't keep it. I got to give it all away for me to keep it. That's all I got there.
Yeah, David went on a really awesome and important jag there, that it's not said explicitly in the book, but it's implied, and it's what's going on here, which is that if you're an addict like I am, there is never a satisfactory answer to any question that starts with why. There just isn't. And if you look at how the book is presented, and I know, guys, that especially we're here in We Agnostics, which is maybe for a lot of people, a lot of new people, maybe the trickiest one because it's a new way of thinking. But if you really look at how Bill wrote this book and you look at the main chapters, it's very factual, mechanically based, right? Bill's story. Here's a story of what happened to Bill, of what Bill was like, what happened, and then who did Bill become? Very fact-based, right? Then that's the next chapter. There is a solution. It talks about what the solution is. It doesn't say, why the solution was constructed. This is what's going to happen. And then more about alcoholism, more facts out of their experience. We Agnostics, here's the story of what we've experienced. This is the best. How it works. Not why it works. How. And then even better, into action. How many times, those of you who've been around a long time, sponsored a bunch of people, it's like, why, but I don't understand. And I'm like, how about do the work? And maybe you'll understand it. I've probably used this in here before. I've got many pop culture references, right? Of course, I'll do a Star Wars one, but when I have new people I'm working with and they're struggling with, I always say, just do the mechanics to start. Because in my experience, doing the mechanics turns into miracles. And so you have like it's like the new student talks to the karate sensei when he's telling him to do a kata in a specific mood, and he says, "Sensei, I don't understand this motion, this move you're making me do. Explain it to me." And the sensei says to him, "Do that move, that motion 10,000 times, right? And the meaning will be revealed to you, right? Do my morning routine 10,000 times. Do 10,000 10-step check-ins with God during the day. Do 10,000 retire at nights. I bet a lot is going to be revealed. Does it come out of me wandering in the desert asking why? No, it does not. It comes from doing the work. This is an action-based recovery program, not a wonder and conceptualize and discuss and hope for understanding. The understanding comes if I do the work, right? And then, I guess my second sort of backup for this too is I'm always talking about my great spiritual guru Yoda from Star Wars. His famous line is "Do or do not. There is no try," which is very powerful and is very relevant to how we approach recovery. And when I have Spunsy, I say, "What 9-step of man are you going to make this week?" Well, I'm going to try to. No. Don't try. Do. Well, what if I can't get a hold of them? Work on the next one. Well, what if I get a hold of them? I'm like, now it's getting ridiculous. You've got 1,700 amends to make. Go on to number 3. All right. But the other thing that Yoda says, because Luke is being trained with him, he's like, but why must I? Yoda cuts him off and he's like, no, there is no why. No more am I going to teach you today. There is never a satisfactory answer for why. The answer for why is only this. Call a newcomer. Pray. If you screw up, be accountable for it. Pray. Turn your thoughts, right? Get started in the morning with God, end the night with God. Keep your side of the street clean. That's it. Those are the answers for why. The action, the how.
Yeah, so the piggyback what David said, and I love that what he brought up. It doesn't say why it works. It says how it works, right? And I always tell my guys, especially the new guys I work with, don't ask me why, ask me how. And the simple reason for that is my actions will tell you what I believe. The book explains to us precise, specific, with clear-cut directions that we do this 10-step. We are standing at the turning point all day long. When I live in 10, it allows me to maintain a conscious contact with God in 11. I know I'm jumping ahead, but I have to give a vision for what our life looks like when we do this work here. And in that paragraph that we just talked about, let's go back. I'm not going to go back to the pages. I'm just going to tell you what pages is on. When we talk about Jim's story on page 35 in the second paragraph, when we talk about Fred's story on page 39 in the second paragraph, it says, Jim and Fred appeared to be normal in every respect. But remember this, the visual outward appearances are the weakest. We're going to find about that next when these mosaic tiles here, right? They appear to be their outward appearances. So the thing is how do I say it? What I see doesn't always represent the truth. What I see, my inward, those two guys seem like normal guys, right? Fred, an accountant, worked his way up the ladder, became a partner in the business. Jim owned a car dealership. Outward appearance, had a family, had kids in college and all this stuff. But what they suffer from is an internal disease, right? Just like me, just like anyone else that wants to conceive their innermost self, they have this. So the fact is like, I just need to know the truth about this thing, but I can't see the truth until I do this work. And the truth is going to come out in the 4th and 5th column of my 4th step. Just saying.
All right, let's keep going. Good stuff. Bottom paragraph of 48. Everybody nowadays believes in scores of assumptions for which there is good evidence, but no perfect visual proof. And does not science demonstrate that visual proof is the weakest proof? It is being constantly revealed as mankind studies the material world that outward appearances are not inward reality at all. To illustrate, guys, I'm at a conference in Las Vegas this week. Every other billboard is for some illusionist. What do illusionists make their livelihoods doing? Fooling what we see, visual proof. They're showing us we cannot depend on our eyeballs. It is the weakest proof. I'm sitting at a table here in my hotel room. This thing feels solid, some sort of stone. It's actually not solid. You guys remember from science, and we're going to talk about it in this next thing, it's whirling electrons, and how they whirl varies by material. It's theoretically possible that I could slam my hand down on this table and actually get it caught in the middle if I cut it right through the electrons just right. Now, practically speaking, is it ever going to happen? Unlikely. It's theoretically possible. right? That's the reality of it. If we had like Superman X-ray vision, we would see the electrons whirring around. But that's not what I see. What I see is a hard table here in front of me, right? What I see is what the illusionist wants me to see, right? Because my brain, my experience, my old ways of thinking, feeling, reacting, my prejudices make me see things only one way.
Yeah, my perceived or my concepts of what I perceive to be the truth is not always the truth. I have a disease of perception. I really do sometimes. You know, my wife was talking to me before dinner tonight, and she started saying something, and I scratched my eye, and she goes, "What?" I was like, "Nothing, nothing." My eye itched. She goes, "Oh, I thought you were going to interrupt me." I'm like, "No, no, no. I wasn't going to start my sentence in the middle of yours. I'm sorry if that's what you thought." But, you know, David's point is with this table here, the only person I've ever seen it was in the movie was Keanu Reeves in The Matrix. He could go right to a table because the mind was powerful. He was able to do that. That's in the movies. But that's true, the science of the whole thing here. So again, these outward appearances are the weakest of what they're talking about. And the fact about that is before I got sober, our outsides looked really good to the outside people. Like we weren't letting anybody in our home. My wife would not she didn't let her family come over for the last year. She would only take phone calls from them. And then when my mother and father-in-law finally came over, my wife was skin and bones. She's not an alcoholic. My disease of alcoholism and drug addiction affected my wife in such a way that she was getting sick too. And when my mother-in-law came over and seen her daughter, she took her aside and said, "You are not well." Because we were keeping all outward appearances. So she was doing this. This is what she needed to do for our family, for our kids, and God bless her for doing it. That's what she needed to do to function. But man, we are all dying on the inside, from the inside out. But recovered alcoholics and drug addicts, my insides start matching my outsides. The perception is real today. It's like my life is not in different areas. Like I don't act one way at work. I don't act one way at home. I don't act one way in AA meeting. I did that for a while. Don't get me wrong. I was a really well-behaved AA member. But man, I would go home and get in an argument with my wife, you know, because I wasn't working any steps. You know, we know what that looks like when we see other people that we work with. I got guys I would take through to work that have been sober 20 years, and they say, I'm sponsoring a gal right now that never went through the work, and she was 30 years sober. I took her through the work. She's 33 years sober now. Her life doesn't look nothing like it did before. Her outward appearances were everything's fine until we dove deep into the steps. And with her, I took my time because she's 30 years sober. But when you're new, I'm taking you to this work quickly because I don't know what the window of opportunity looks like. I don't know how fast that window's going to shut. I'm going to take you through the work quickly. But then again, we're going to go back over the text. We're going to take our time going through this. I suggest you go to a lot of big book studies. Like Kevin brought up earlier in the meeting, thank God for Zoom. I have learned so much from you guys from going to big book studies. When I go to Howard's on Sunday or on Monday, or I go to other ones, and I only go to literature-based meetings. I don't care about discussion meetings whatsoever, or as Cameron F. says, open disgusting meetings. I don't do those. I just don't care about those things, you know. But what I do care about is I care about my relationship with God, because all my relationships are dependent upon having a strong relationship with that power.
And this inward versus outward and external versus internal is a really big theme in 12-step recovery as well. Right? I already took us reference back to page 27, which is, you know, it's the psychic change, the vital spiritual experience results in new thinking that's inside my head, new feeling that's inside my heart, and new attitudes that are inside my gut. It's all inward. It's all internal. What if the vital spiritual experience said, my wife is going to be nicer to me, my boss is going to give me a raise, and I'm and a fancy new car and house are going to drop from the sky? What? Those could have been the promises, right? But they're not. Those are outward things. Changes in my outward life, my external circumstances, are not going to make me better because I'm rotting from the inside out. And we won't get there tonight, but in a week or two on page 52, we're going to get to the bedevilments that David already brought up. Is so good. And spoiler alert, we're going to go through them, and then David's going to recap all those problems, all those bedevilments. They're all going on inside. All right. The person I'm having, the personal relationship that I'm having difficulty with, it's not that other person. It's me. Right? That's an inside job.
It is an inside job, and it cannot be produced by any human power. The things that David talked about on page 27. And by the way, this must happen first if we're going to recover all those three things. And then David also talked about, and it doesn't matter, he brought it up on page 52, and I'm not going to jump ahead other than I'm going to bring up the first sentence. Anytime in recovery that I'm having an issue with another person, the bedevilments, I could start living with them. I would guarantee you, for the most part, that the first one is going to be true. We were having trouble with personal relationships. That's the one that I can go to right away. Am I having trouble with my wife? Am I having trouble with my sister-in-law? I was at Christmas this year, and my sister-in-law said something passive-aggressive to me. You know, I had prayed long before I went there, because I always pray before I go to my in-laws. Not that I just need to behave myself. They're fine. They don't have to change a thing. Trust me, that's so true. I used to think they needed to change everything. They don't need change. But what I say is a third step prayer, because the third step prayer is a selfless prayer. And when she says something passive aggressive to me, did I react to it? I did not react to it. The power came not of me, but came through me. And I didn't harm my wife, my sister-in-law, my father-in-law who was there, my kids, my grandchildren, all the other people who were there. That is the power of God in my life, because I brought him in. I opened up the door and let him walk in first. You know what? And I only bring that up to you because I'm not holding resentment. It's just a memory. That's all it is a memory. But the memory is this, that I accessed that power by inviting him in, and I didn't harm anyone. And when I have that kind of an experience, why don't I utilize that all day long? Why don't I just bring that in all day long? And I do now today. Like, I have a successful business as well as David does. You know, and I have relationships with everyone in my family. We're babysitting our 6-month-old grandson this week. It is so fun. For any of you grandparents that know, I have an 18-year-old grandson, I have a 10-year-old granddaughter, and I have a 6-month-old grandson. This time at 6 months old, and we've raised these kids, so we got to do that. This 6-month-old, we are like, my daughter asked us, she goes, "Are you entertaining him 24/7?" I'm like, "Oh, no, not at all." It's like, yes, we are. We give him our undivided attention until he takes a nap, and then we need one. But, oh, my God, the experience to be that. I never thought life would be like that. And it goes right back to what I said originally. How free do you want to be?
Okay, everybody. Gets a little wordy here in this paragraph.
Sorry.
Right? So no. I'm talking about what we're about to read, not you. Not you.
All right. Yeah. $20 words here.
Yeah, a lot of $20 words here. Okay. The prosaic steel girder is a mass of electrons whirling around each other at incredible speed. These tiny bodies are governed by precise laws, and these laws hold true throughout the material world. Science tells us so. We have no reason to doubt it. When, however, the perfectly logical assumption is suggested that underneath the material world and life as we see it, there is an all-powerful, caps here, guys, guiding, creative intelligence. Right there, our perverse streak comes to the surface, and we laboriously set out to convince ourselves it isn't so. We read wordy books and indulge in windy arguments, thinking we believe this universe needs no God to explain it. Were our contentions true, it would follow that life originated out of nothing, means nothing, and proceeds nowhere. Did you guys follow that? It's kind of like I don't want to say clunky, but it's about as flowery as Bill gets. So maybe before I editorialize, let's just make sure everybody understands what he's saying here. And Rob gave us a nice definition of prosaic: ordinary, everyday, lifeless, dull, straightforward. So the everyday steel girder, right, the big steel, thing that we see on job sites, right, is really a mass of electrons. I said this earlier. You guys remember this, right? Is that chemistry or physics? I don't know. I wasn't great in science, but you got the protons and the neutrons and the electrons, and it's all whirring around in the atoms, right? So it's these crazy things moving. They're microscopic and faster than the eye can see. They're at incredible speed, and that's how they construct material. So that's what a steel girder is actually made of. And it's saying that the way that physics works is that, I'd said it's theoretically possible I could put my hand right through the table. All the physics, all the laws of science say it doesn't really happen, that the steel girder stays giant, solid, impenetrable steel girder, right? And these are everywhere throughout our world. Everything we touch, everything we interact with is governed by all these rules. And because of this, because that's our experience, if I punch the table, if I hit myself in the head with a hammer, these are going to be hard, painful things. It's everywhere in our world. Hot coffee, right? It's going to burn. So we have no reason to doubt this because we experience it. However, and this is what Bill's doing a little selling here, he's saying, why can't we take that faith we have, the faith that if I slam my hand here, it's going to hurt? Why can't I carry that same faith to say that maybe everything in this world is really also governed, led, fathered by an all-loving, all-powerful, guiding, creative intelligence? Why can't I take that position as well? What it says and what it talks about being an agnostic and being an atheist, that instead of being willing to consider that, we laboriously, so as Rob put here, with great effort, a great amount of labor or difficulty, we reinforce our prejudices. We double down on the obstinacy to say there is no way, because I can't see it, I can't feel it, I can't touch it. We're just not willing to believe that there is a God in play here. And to back that up, I'm going to go read a bunch of books on philosophy. I'm going to have all these windy arguments, blah, 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 and carry on saying, this is how I can prove there's no God. And we told the story, it was last week or the week before, that this guy in a treatment center yelled at me and David and said, there's no God, and it's been scientifically proven. And we're like, okay. Right. Windy argument from this guy. We didn't argue back. It's okay. Right? Believe what you're going to believe. But he was exemplative of who I was, who I know David was from his story before we came around, right? Every argument against this. Because for me to, and I said I wasn't going to editorialize, couldn't help myself, which was flowing. For me to really admit that there's something more powerful than me was a point I had to get to. I believed I don't know if I believed I was all powerful, but as I'm fond of saying, I believed I could out-muscle or outthink any problem. And to me, that equaled power. That was the power that I exerted. But when my power wasn't sufficient and I had to believe in a power greater than myself, I wanted to switch it off. I wanted to fight it. I wanted to argue it. I'm a good talker, like I said already. I'm a good arguer too. I don't do much of it these days because it's not real healthy for me to argue, But I sure did at the beginning. I sure stuck my heels in the dirt. I always say for 38 days. 38th day, I asked the man to sponsor me. Don't wait 38 days, right? Face the alcoholic destruction. Come to terms with it. The addicted destruction. Get help. Take the help. Move quickly. Go ahead, David.
Yeah. So the question is, and it goes back to that window of opportunity, how fast it shuts. So do I desperately need a power greater than myself? Do I desperately need one or not? Because what happens here is that's what I'm talking about when the window of opportunity shuts so quickly. My outside world gets a little bit better, right? I'm back to work. I go 5 days in a row to work because this is the first time I've done that in a long time. And I keep going to work, and all of a sudden they start acknowledging me that thanks for showing up. Like, dude, you have to thank me. I got a paycheck. That's my thank you. And I start doing my job well. And then I start participating at home to some degree, but I'm a little irritable, restless, and discontented, right? This is untreated alcoholism. This is unmanageability. This is my problem in life. But do I desperately need a power greater than myself? Well, I found out because I would go home and get in arguments because I hadn't worked any steps, because I didn't follow the directions of a guy who said he would sponsor me, and then he got rid of me quickly because I wasn't doing anything he said. He said, you're wasting my time. I need to work with somebody I can work with. And my life wasn't any different. Matter of fact, I was worse. But when I started to do this work, I found out that I had a power in my life, and it was a creative intelligence. And I gave this definition last week. I believe it was last week when Joe Hawk gives this one. And the wording creative is a function of the will, a decision to take action, power for my will so I do better. Power for my will so I do better. And then the intelligence part is a function of the mind for directions from my mind so I know better. So I will do better when I have this creative intelligence and I have access to it because I'm not blocked by my ego, it's deflated and self isn't showing up. Then I can do better because I know better. Like it just, they give us directions in the book. Pause when agitated or doubtful. That comes long before rage and anger. Pause comes long before that. And when I do those disciplines, and they are disciplines, again, when I practice the discipline of 10, it allows me to maintain, and it's not the same as the maintenance steps as people call them. They're not maintenance steps. I don't want I maintain the steps. But I want to maintain a relationship with God. I want to grow in understanding of effectiveness of what God's will is for me. And then I can have access to that power all day long. Then I know how to, I have the will to do better, and I do better in my life all day long. Like I can't remember the last time I had a disagreement with someone for that matter. I mean, maybe you should take a poll and walk around my house. It might be a different story because of my disease of perception, but I'm pretty certain that this hasn't happened in a long, long time. So this is that creative intelligence. At the bottom of that paragraph on page 49, it talks about contentious, and the definition, I don't know if Rob put it in the chat or not, but he probably did because he's so good at everything. So contentious is causing or likely to cause an argument, controversy, right? And then it says it would follow the life originated out of nothing, means nothing, proceeds nowhere. That is not open-mindedness. Like, I'm not saying that. I have to have some sort of an open mind here, because when we go back to page 48 at the top of the page, it talks about obstinacy, sensitiveness, and unreasonable prejudice. My prejudices, preconceived thoughts are my opinions. I got to let go of all those ideas. I'm not saying I know that there's a heaven. I don't know that there's something after this, but I believe that there is, and I'd rather find out that there isn't than that there is. I want to try to live the life that God intended me to live all along. I believe that I was supposed to live a certain life, and I drank and drugged it all away until I completely conceded to my innermost self and I did this work. Now I'm living the life I believe, to the ability that I have, the ability that God gives me, the working the steps, to live the life that He intended me to have. And what was that to be? Is to be useful. I think that's life, to be useful to others, to be of maximum service to God and all His kids. I get to do that all day long because I'm in sales. Yeah, I make a good living, but at the same time, I do it because I get everything I learned in my business, I learned from you people in AA, honestly. It's about service. It's about love and tolerance. Honest to God, I'm telling you, God does not make too difficult of terms. He doesn't, because He knows I'm a knucklehead and I need it to be simple. You got to get off, David, because I know you got a thing you got to get to.
Let's do one more. Yeah, one more small.
Okay.
We'll do the small paragraph here.
Okay.
Page 49, continuing along. Instead of regarding ourselves as intelligent agents, spearheads of God's ever-advancing capital C creation, we agnostics and atheists chose to believe that our human intelligence was the last word, the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and end of all. Rather vain of us, wasn't it? So in the Greek alphabet, Alpha is the first letter, Omega is the last word. So it's saying we, at coming into recovery and our old ways of thinking, feeling, and reacting, our belief system was, despite consideration to have some faith that maybe there is a capital C creation, right? God-driven, that rather humanity, and in particular, speaking for myself, my humanity, my ability to outthink or outmuscle everything, that was it. If I couldn't outthink it, if I couldn't outmuscle it, it just wasn't. Well, could not conceive that there was something else going on.
And the last sentence on there is all I'm going to speak on right now is it says, rather vain of us, wasn't it? Here, it's just so simple. David plays David and God plays God. I don't need to play God. As we get into 62, 63, we're going to see how much God I do play. I remember doing some harm to someone in my family, and I didn't even realize I was doing it until I took an inventory, and I realized I was playing God in their life. It brought me to tears when I read those pages 62, 63. I didn't even see it showing up in my life, and certainly not in theirs, and I don't even know if they were aware that I harmed them.
Yeah.
But I was. Rather vain, wasn't it? God, David plays David, God plays God.
All right, we're going to stop there tonight, guys. So one sec.